The breathtaking beauty of the Bahamas National Parks is a true testament to the success of conservation efforts in the country. But as the parks continue to grow and expand, so do the financial challenges to maintain them. Join us as we explore the innovative and diverse funding models being used to preserve these natural treasures and see how you can play a role in securing their future. This is Investing in Conservation, Funding the Future of National Parks in the Bahamas. Keep watching. A brand new episode of You and Your Money starts now.
You and Your Money is brought to you by the Bahamas Cooperative League, Caribbean Bottling, Leno, the Insurance Commission of the Bahamas, BOCOL, Central Bank of the Bahamas, and Western Air.
Hi, my name is Amanda Ferguson with Biggity Candle Company. With 𝗪𝗏, we were very pleased to know that we were offered another way for customers to make payments that were digital. We don't like handling cash, the physical cash anymore. It's safer that way. I can tell you that, I won't go back. I much rather the transactions being on my phone. It's simple, it's instantaneous, and my customers have actually really loved it too.
Do business better with 𝗪𝗏. Learn more at 𝗪𝗏.bs.
Welcome to You and Your Money, everyone. Joining us today to talk about investing in conservation, funding the future of national parks in the Bahamas is Mrs. Lakeisha Anderson-Rolle, the recently appointed Executive Director. Mrs. Anderson-Rolle assumed the position of Executive Director on January 1st, 2023, having served for the past 11 years as BNT Director of Parks. Along with Mrs. Anderson-Rolle, we also have with us Mr. Geoff Andrews, who is currently serving as BNT's Council President and is also the past Chairman of the Access Accelerator Small Business Development Center. Mrs. Anderson-Rolle and Mr. Andrews, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Anderson-Rolle, BNT is for the parks, for the country, for the future. For the viewers out there that may not have an understanding of what BNT is all about, I want to first of all ask, who is BNT and what does BNT do?
The Bahamas National Trust is the National Park Service of the Bahamas. We are very unique in terms of how we are structured. Typically, a national park system is managed by the government. However, we are uniquely structured as a nonprofit, non-government membership organization with a statutory mandate to manage the country's entire national park system. So yes, it's a huge job. Currently, the BNT manages 32 national parks across the country, covering 2.2 million acres of both land and seascapes. We have 8 offices across the islands, but we manage these spaces across 10 islands. And so we are a growing organization, and we continue to advance protective measures across the system. Now, I want to touch on what is the role of the Bahamas National Trust and what does park management actually looks like. So we have 3 core focal areas. Parks, obviously, which is our largest department, responsible for enforcement and surveilling all of the national parks across the system, as well as visitor safety. We have our science department, where we have science officers, both terrestrial and marine, responsible for monitoring the national parks, which informs how we manage the parks. And so collecting data is critical to our work, working within the communities with our education and outreach department, working on environmental education programs where we reach 20,000 youth across the country every year. We look forward to continuing the great work with our partners across the system. We cannot do this work alone. BNT, we are merely the caretakers of the national parks, but we do this on behalf of the Bahamian people.
Now, I want to ask, what are some of the current financial challenges considering this great work that BNT is actually doing in terms of having to maintain and expand the national parks in the Bahamas?
The financial challenges have been consistent, and considering we are a growing organization, we are still not effectively and fully managing all 32 national parks. We do receive an annual government subvention of $1.5 million every year. We also have other revenue streams coming in, but our financial challenges has a lot to do with our expansion. We have 89 staff, fully part-time and contracted staff across the system. But in 2019, the government inquired on what is the cost of managing a 32 national park system. And the reality of it is In order to manage 32 areas, we need at least 250 staff. And again, we're about 89. And so the financial challenges has to do with human capital, investing in our human capital. Infrastructure plays a huge part in our work. Obviously, we won't be incorporating infrastructure in all of the national parks, but we do have a stock assessment where visitation is critically important, which requires infrastructure. A lot of funding has been restricted to things like management planning, which is critically important, and other programs. But we need to invest in major equipment. We need boats in the water. We need trucks on the roads. We need staffing in place. We also need infrastructure, signage. And so the challenges has a lot to do with providing the capital, the human capital, and the capital works in order for us to sustain and bring in the revenue needed to cover our operational expenses. We also have unexpected expenses from time to time. As an organization managing national parks, in the climate of the issues that we're facing with climate change, we've had significant economic loss as well as habitat loss to our national parks that has sustained extreme damages during hurricane events and other storm events. And so we have lost infrastructure, we have lost habitats. And so funding for habitat and species restoration is critically important and can be extremely costly as well. And so we have financial challenges with respect to a wide range of issues that we need to really put focus on sustainable financing mechanism. And we also need and will continue to advocate for the increase in the government subvention, amongst other things. But we will continue to do what it takes in order to raise funding to support the management of our national parks.
Now, Mr. Andrews, what are some of the funding strategies that's being used to support the efforts of the BNT in maintaining and expanding the national parks?
So first of all, as Lakeisha mentioned, it is important that we continue to receive the funds from the government. We are most appreciative of those funds, but we would like to see those increase because the number of parks that we are managing has increased. Notwithstanding that, we have a lot of great corporate and individual donors who have supported the BNT. We've had an active fundraising campaign, of course, for years, but recently we had to step our game up when the pandemic hit because all of a sudden we lost a lot of our income source, but we had to continue to incur those expenses to protect these important areas. So we ran a campaign during the first year of the pandemic, which was very successful, and we built on that the following 2 years and had 2 very successful fundraising campaigns the last 2 years. But that's only a start, and we have to continue. But we can't do it without the great support we get from both corporate and individual donors.
Well, we definitely need those sponsorships and the funds and the resources to come from where we can get them to come from. Mrs. Anderson-Rolle, I wanted us to talk a little bit about what are some of the potential economic benefits of investing in national parks conservation in the Bahamas?
So investing in national parks is a great opportunity not only for the BNT, but for the country as a whole. National parks are great valued tourism products that are so at the top of the list in terms of the visitor experience. Visitors want to come to the Bahamas for nature experiences. They want to move away from the city center. They want to visit our family islands and enjoy national parks, which attract thousands of visitors throughout the year. So tourists coming to the Bahamas to visit national parks increases revenue not only for the government, also for the BNT, but also for the local communities and businesses surrounding and neighboring national parks. We also think of national parks as ways of providing direct job benefits for people. And so as I mentioned, we are at 89 in terms of how many persons we employ. We need to get to 250, and so that is direct jobs for Bahamians to be able to work on the islands where they were born across the system. And so we want to continue increasing our human capital, hiring staff to conduct the work within the national parks, but also working with the local businesses and communities for new potential business opportunities that benefits directly and indirectly because of the presence and location of the national parks.
Now, Mr. Andrews, what are the benefits of the national parks to the environment as well as the overall economy?
Well, it's important to recognize that these national parks are areas where species can live in safety and peace. they are also, most of these, many of the national parks are areas that are protection to our coastland. So right here on New Providence, we have, of course, Bonefish Pond National Park, which is a very important area for protecting the coastline of that area. So from that aspect, it's really important to preserve and protect the parks for those reasons. At the same time, the benefits for tourism, as Lakeisha has mentioned, we certainly can employ a lot more people. But one of the things that we know is as these national parks grow and the visitors to them grow, there are side businesses that come about. And the BNT is not interested in running a cafe in a national park or leading kayak tours in a national park. But we would certainly welcome entrepreneurs to come and conduct those businesses in and around our national parks. So the benefits go far and wide to the various communities where these parks are.
I truly appreciate that you spoke about the kayaking as well as the cafes, looking at presenting opportunities to other entrepreneurs to be a part of what it is that you're doing at BNT. Well, Mrs. Anderson-Rolle and Mr. Andrews, we have to take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to look at the role of corporate partnerships in funding national parks in the Bahamas. This is You and Your Money. We'll be right back.
Coca-Cola Bahamas has always been a strong community partner for us. They've supported and helped us to
reach hundreds of young men through Sprite basketball,
create a fun and interactive United FC,
go a little bit further for our animal friends,
feed thousands of Bahamians every year,
preserve our natural habitat,
and celebrate Bahamian culture and 𝗖𝗛𝗥𝗡𝗘𝗧𝗏 on Pace.
The Caribbean bottling team is committed to the communities that we serve around the entire Bahamas.
Summer travel is here. Jet to Fort Lauderdale on Western Air. Jet with ease and comfort. Got bags? We've got you. Your first check bag is free. Personal bag and carry-on included. No change fees, no cancellation fees, no penalties. Travel on your own time with flexible ticket options. Book today. Travel any day. Book now at westernairbahamas.com.
Samantha's always on point. She doesn't miss a thing. When she signs up for any insurance policy, she reads all the fine print. She knows what's covered, what's not covered, and she's aware of her deductibles. When it comes to insurance, it pays to know your policy. Review every insurance policy so you know what you're covered for. This message was brought to you by the Insurance Commission of the Bahamas.
It's coming! Thursday, the 18th of May, 2023 at Fernandez Bay Village and via Zoom is the first ever in-person Cat Island Business Outlet, which also covers San Salvador and Rum Key. Our theme is Forward, Upward, Onward Together. Our keynote speaker is Cat Island's own Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Davis. Other speakers will discuss airport development, roadworks and utilities, and foreign investment, and much more. Attend in person for $75 or $50 via Zoom. Register today at tclevents.com.
Welcome back to You and Your Money. If you're just now tuning in, the Executive Director of Bahamas National Trust, Mrs. Lakeisha Anderson-Rolle, along with the Council President, Mr. Geoff Andrews, is here with us today, talking about investing in conservation, funding the future of national parks in the Bahamas. Mrs. Anderson-Rolle, before the break, we talked about the financial challenges faced by the BNT in maintaining and expanding the national parks. In this segment, I want us to talk a bit more about the role of corporate partnerships in funding the national parks in the Bahamas. How do corporate partnerships benefit both the Bahamas National Trust and the companies involved?
Corporate partnership is extremely important to the Bahamas National Trust. We highly depend on corporate sponsors for our fundraising events, and our fundraising events provide direct support to the national parks that we manage. We also have corporate sponsors who provide resources not only for events, but also sponsoring some of our programs, some of our environmental youth programs. And it also gives them the opportunity to show their commitment for environmental conservation through volunteerism, whether it's establishing and participating in volunteer days at our national parks, but also providing volunteerism in terms of providing assistance at the national parks that really significantly helps us with our capacity issues. So we plan to increase our corporate partnerships, whether it's through events, but also whether it's through having that on-site support throughout the year, showing their commitment to the national park system.
What are some of these events that you're speaking of?
So we have 3 major events, fundraising events that takes place towards the end of the year. So we do have Wine and Art and Jollification in New Providence, which are the highly anticipated events for the year. We have Festival Noel in Grand Bahama, which helps us to kick off the holiday season. Earlier in the year, we have our Cuban pig roast, which is certainly one that has increasingly become popular. We are raising funds this year for our Cuban pig roast for the new Welcome Center at 𝗪𝗧𝗧𝗛𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 National Park on mainland 𝗪𝗏𝗧. And so the pig roast, our Cuban pig roast this year is on Saturday, June 10th. Don't hesitate, buy your tickets. All of our events support the management and operational expenses for the Bahamas National Trust.
All right, thank you for that. Mr. Andrews, what are some of those challenges that may arise when forming corporate partnerships for national park funding, and how can they be addressed?
Well, one of the big issues that many corporations are looking at now is how do they give back to the environment? And it's such a hot topic, and the whole ESG mindset is made it very important for corporate sponsors to be seen to be doing something. At the same time, that we have to make sure that the support they give is real and actual support, whether it's in dollars or volunteer hours, and that it's not just something that they're doing to put in their annual report or tick a box. So we work very closely with the corporate partners to make sure that the support they give us is very valuable to what we're doing. And we continue to expand on that, and we're looking at ways to have corporations have all their staff become members of the parks, and then, of the BNT, and then they can get access to all the parks. And there are many ways that corporations can contribute. Of course, financial is a big one, but there are volunteer opportunities, as Lakeisha has explained, and we just continue to build these corporate relationships.
Mrs. Anderson-Rolle, how can these corporate partnerships be used not only to fund the national parks, but also to promote sustainable and responsible business practices?
There are other opportunities for corporate partners that can show their commitment at the workplace, for their commitment to environmental sustainable practices, whether it's through policies or procedures. They can consider going paperless, encourage recycling, and also using recyclable products as well. And so we do encourage companies to show their environmental responsibilities by doing so. Corporate sponsors can also provide membership fees or cover membership for students and kids. And so they can sponsor a whole classroom of students to become members of the BNT. That not only increases our revenue, but also shows their commitment to the environment. We have quite a number of students who are not in a position to become members of the organization. And so this will also show their commitment and them being able to complement that as well.
Is there a particular age bracket? How young can a person be to become a member?
You can become a member at any age, actually. A newborn can be a part of a family membership. Okay. And so in terms of family membership, it's 2 adults and 2 children under the age of 12. And so a membership for children is under the age of 12.
All right, good to know. Mr. Andrews, what type of incentives can be offered to companies to encourage their involvement in national park funding?
So one of the obvious opportunities is for branding, and we've had discussions with major corporate sponsors as far as adopting parks, and as Lakeisha has explained, we do need infrastructure at many of our parks, but we also will then need upkeep of them, and so we are exploring opportunities for companies to brand themselves with particular parks, and in particular here in New Providence, where there are major parks that need a lot of work, and there's great opportunities for these companies to brand with them.
The thought that's coming to mind is adopt a park. So if you are a company out there that you're thinking about an opportunity for you to be a part of what it is that BNT is doing, definitely adopt a park. Mrs. Anderson-Rolle and Mr. Andrews, we have to take another break. This is You and Your Money. We'll be right back.
Focall Holdings Limited is proud of its consistent growth and the financial success it continues to bring to many Bahamians who invest in the company. Focall is committed to ensuring optimal financial performance for its shareholders. 𝗪𝗧𝗛𝗡's leadership remains focused on superior customer service and operational excellence across all sectors. 𝗪𝗡𝗡, fueling growth for people.
Meet 𝗪𝗡, your bridge to the future. Wealth planning, investments, corporate services, trust services, pension administration, fund administration, outsourced accounting, and payroll. When you think of financial solutions, think of 𝗪𝗡. Local or international, company or individual, 𝗪𝗡 can help. Our team of skilled professionals has the experience and expertise needed for you to strive. Your goals are our goals and our priority. 𝗪𝗡 will guide you to the right financial solution with the knowledge, resources, and support you need. Give us a call at 242-396-3225 or email us at info@lepnobahamas.com to get started. Visit our website, www.lepnobahamas.com, for more information today. 𝗪𝗡, your bridge to the future.
It's coming! Thursday, the 18th of May, 2023 at Fernandez Bay Village and via Zoom is the first ever in-person Cat Island Business Outlet, which also covers San Salvador and 𝗪𝗓𝗡𝗡. Our theme is Forward, Upward, Onward Together. Our keynote speaker is Cat Island's own Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Davis. Other speakers will discuss airport development, roadworks and utilities, and foreign investment, and much more. Attend in person for $75 or $50 via Zoom. Register today at tclevents.com.
Welcome back to You and Your Money. Mrs. Anderson-Rolle, Executive Director of BNT, along with Mr. Geoff Andrews, BNT's Council President, are still with us. In the previous segments, we spoke about the financial challenges and corporate partnerships in funding national parks in the Bahamas. In this segment, I want us to talk a little bit about balancing conservation as well as economic development. Now, Mr. Andrews, what are some of the economic benefits of protected areas in the Bahamas, and how can they be balanced with the need for economic development?
So this is always an interesting discussion that we have with the government, because we recognize that all governments want development, they want job opportunities, but part of the reason why development happens here is because of the beauty and the natural resources that we have. So we have to balance the two. The national parks provide a feeder system for many of our fish and wildlife that tourists come here to see. They also are beautiful areas that many people should see. In fact, FODORS has just released a study on, or an article on 25 things that you should do in the Bahamas, and 3 of those involve national parks. Quite frankly, it should be all 25, but that's another story. But realistically, people do come here for the beauty of our country, and if we overdevelop it and we overdevelop near our parks and near our great beautiful spots, then people aren't going to want to come here as much. So it's a fine line that we have to walk, and we continue to engage with the government to make sure that development is done in an environmentally sensitive and practical way.
Now, I want you to touch a little bit on what are some of those cost factors involved in terms of having to continue the work of what BNT is actually doing, the specifics.
So the IDB did a study, it's quite a few years now, so you can imagine that the cost would be even higher now. But looking at the 32 national parks that we are responsible for maintaining and running, the budget should be about $10 million a year. Right now, the past 3 years, we've been running on a budget of $6 to $7 million a year. So you can see there's a lot of work to do to catch up to that level of 10 million plus a year. And we continue to work on both short and long-term strategies as to how to increase our financing and thereby increase the parks that we're managing and do a better job with them than we're already doing.
In addition to that, in terms of where we are in our operational needs, we would need to invest about $25 million in infrastructure, where the operating costs would be around $10 to $12 million. So in order for us to be able to meet that, we would need to invest $25 million in infrastructure to support visitor experiences, but also to protect the resources as well. And so yes, 10 to 12 million in operational expenses, but we also have to invest about 25 million in infrastructure.
Wow, so we can see that the need is really, really great. Yeah. Now, what are some of those costs, Mrs. Anderson-Rolle, of the development in the protected areas, and how can they be mitigated or avoided altogether?
So we understand that development, economic development has to happen for the country, but we also recognize that we're a coastal nation and we heavily depend on our natural resources to sustain us as a people, to sustain us culturally, and also for us to be able to continue enjoying what we've known to enjoy in terms of our seafood and everything else, and our beaches. Habitat loss is significant from development. Let's just think about coral reefs. If you're dredging, you're impacting coral reefs. That also has an impact on the coastline that protects us during storms by breaking waves. If you're removing mangroves, you're removing the flooding, the mechanisms that protect us from flooding. And so we have to really consider what development looks like and really focus on more sustainable development practices, especially in our family islands. Again, visitors come for nature. They come to experience the Bahamas in its natural state. And so there needs to be a balance with development and with the natural environment.
Mr. Andrews, talk to us a bit about why is sustainable development important in the Bahamas and how could it actually be achieved while still protecting the environment?
Well, as we've said, it's important to have this sustainable development because if we don't have this natural beauty, then there is a risk that people decide not to come here anymore. So we have to keep the beauty and we have to do it in a sustainable way. Our government has made a very great case for arguing that the Bahamas suffers more than perhaps anywhere else because of all the things that have happened with climate change. So if we're going to go and lead that charge, then we need to be demonstrating that we are adhering to those same principles and making sure that we do things sustainably. I know we continue to push for sustainable energy. It is, of course, a challenge, but we need to continue in those ways. And luckily, many of the developers who come in are looking at the sustainability as they try to develop because we have to keep this beauty. Without the beauty, we don't know if people continue to come here.
Well, sustainability is definitely the key if we're thinking about the next 50 years. So Mrs. Anderson-Rolle, how can the government of the Bahamas balance the need for economic development with the protection of national parks and other protected areas?
So in the absence of land use plans for all of the islands of the Bahamas, there are areas that should be considered for protection. And so the conservation community has made recommendations to government in terms of which areas are extremely sensitive, which areas should be set aside for protection. And when I use the word protection with respect to protected areas and national parks, it does not mean that all areas will be set aside without allowing certain activities to take place. And so balancing the need for protection, having some no-take areas, but also having areas where we do allow fishing, we do allow certain activities to take place that also provide support for our local communities. And so we have identified across the islands from Abaco, Grand Bahama, all the way to Anagua, which areas should be set aside, and that can help with encouraging and promoting development in areas that doesn't impact those very unique and critical areas that should be set aside for resource protection.
Well, Mrs. Anderson-Rolle and Mr. Andrews, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's show. To get in touch with them, you can visit their website at www.bnt.bs. Remember, you can help them to protect our natural heritage by becoming a BNT member, donating, volunteering, enrolling your business in their corporate partnership program, or naming the BNT as a benefactor in your will. Also, don't forget to follow You and Your Money on Facebook and tune in next week for a brand new episode. I'm Ria Christina. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
You and Your Money was brought to you by the Bahamas Cooperative League, Caribbean Bottling, Leno, the Insurance Commission of the Bahamas, 𝗖𝗙𝗡𝗡𝗘𝗖𝗧, Central Bank of the Bahamas, and Western Air.